Hi, I'm Sophie Morrison, co-founder at Paso, a UK CBD brand. We sell a range of vape and edible products, but today I'm lucky enough to be the moderator of this wonderful panel on creating consistent cannabis products and experiences. As a brand myself, I know the importance of consistency to establishing trust and loyalty in our products and the brand as well, especially when a consumer expects a particular effect or benefit. They want to know what they're getting, providing a level of comfort and safety to new customers who may be afraid to try, that's the case in London, or assurance to returning customers that they can rely on the products and predict the same great experience again and again. So this includes flavor, cannabinoid profile, onset times, and overall brand wrapper. So I'm so excited to hear from both sides of the equation on how to create a consistent end-to-end product. So we've got two consumer brand perspectives, industry veteran Guy from Papa and Barkley, and Christine from Gron, who can chat to see what it takes to deliver consistency to customers. And then the perspective of a manufacturer who develops the active ingredients that many brands use to ensure they have a reliable and consistent experiences of their products. So Austin from Vertosa. So without further ado, the esteemed panel, I'm sure many people know who everyone is already, but I will stick to formalities and you'll go round the horn and everyone can introduce themselves, their company, role, and then a little bit about why you got into cannabis, the industry, for the audience. So where should I start? Austin, you're right underneath me.
Well, happy to. Thank you so much, Sophie, for having me. I'm completely lucky to be on such an esteemed panel with Guy and Christine, and incredibly excited about what we're talking about. It's consistent, reliable cannabis experiences through infused products. So my name is Austin Stevenson. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Vertosa, where we deliver the world's most trusted cannabis ingredient. We work with clients domestically and abroad, everyone from Lagunitas Hi-Fi hops to Vita Coco infused to deliver a fast-acting, controlled, and metered cannabis and hemp experience through our technologies. I've been in the cannabis industry for the past 6.5 years as an operator, advisor, and investor across the supply chain on both marijuana side as well as the hemp side. Immediately before Vertosa, I led a hemp and CBD testing facility at Eurofins Scientific, and it was there at Eurofins that I saw a lot of the problems around consistent dosing and effective shelf-stable products for retailers. So I really got into the industry with one singular purpose, is really to design amazing experiences with cannabis. I love this plant. I've consumed this plant for decades, and it has so many benefits that the world needs to see outside of just smoking a joint or inhaling a vape. And that's what we're all here to do and to show, is that you can have an amazing cannabis experience and do it in a very familiar way through a beverage or a candy or a topical. So thanks for having me, and excited to dive deeper.
Thanks, Austin. Christine.
Yeah, so my name is Christine Smith. I'm the founder and CEO of the Gron companies. I am actually a licensed architect. So I came into this industry after practicing architecture in the development world for about 20 years. And I thought I would enter into the space really from the packaging and branding side, but quickly found that there weren't any products that met the expectation. And this was maybe back in 2013, 14 in Oregon, here, that there weren't any products that were really consistent and that I was really comfortable even working for from the packaging side. And so kind of took up the art of chocolate and started working with a chocolatier and really leaned heavy into chocolate primarily because it's a really great base to start with cannabinoid absorption. So anyone that knows that, it's fat. It's such a high fat content that it's really getting the homogeneity going and consistent with that was really pretty easy to do. And so we started with chocolate, and we very quickly grew. We've organically grown the company. Now we've got about 50 employees here. 2 hours from a cannabis arm that we're multi-state operator, and then a CBD, minor cannabinoids with CBD, CBN branch here that we're based out of Oregon, and then supplying across the United States, the UK, Japan, and the EU. So it's been quite a journey. We still really lean heavy into homogeneity and consistency, and I think as Austin was saying too, it's really it's kind of the core fundamental mechanism behind really being in this industry. If you can't get that, you can't even get off the ground. And so it's I think there's a lot of companies and inconsistencies in different markets that are immature as people grow, and testing isn't really developed, and so we're all trying to figure this out. But I think there's just so much to learn, and the more we learn, the more we realize how much there is more to learn. And I'm just really honored to be on this panel with you guys today, and to talk more about it.
Thanks, Christine. Guy.
Hi, my name is Guy Rocourt. I'm the co-founder and president of Paso and Barkley. I'm also the chief product officer, so I like to make cannabis products. I'm really excited to be here. I always love talking about cannabis. Feel free to flag me if I go on and on, because I think of it deeply. And that's because at this point, I've been in cannabis the majority of my adult life. I started beyond just, your personal use when I left the service. I started in earnest when I hooked up with Montel Williams on a movie set. I'm in the DGA. I was working film in New York, and I did a movie with him when he came out with his MS. And of course, he was using cannabis, and that started my advocacy work in about 1998. And then I took a job with Paramount in California in about 2000. And that's when I realized, oh, well, they have this Proposition 215 thing, and, they're going to get it together. People have voted. This is amazing. People are seeing the benefit of cannabis. Of course, as we all know, decades passed before we actually got real laws and legislation. In the meantime, I did, when I came up with my first vape pen formula, of course, because like many of us, the first time I saw an e-cigarette, I was like, that should be cannabis. So I quickly endeavored to find out how to make that. I had, several grows at that time in the traditional market, and came up with a vape pen formula, which of course, I guess, total transparency, was way easier to move about the cabin and send to different folks. And so, of course, I started to get a lot of inquiries around investment. I was pretty frustrated with what was going on in California, so I did take some investment dollars and start a vape pen company in Colorado called Neos, now called Voda, which is also happens to be solventless as well. And then luckily I met my partner Adam here in California, and we started Paso and Barkley. And cannabis is my life. I don't remember life without cannabis that much. I mean, I remember a little bit being in the service and stuff like that in the movie industry, but at this point I feel like I bleed green. And that's really a little bit about me.
Thanks so much. Awesome. I mean, I think it's clear to say this is going to be a pretty epic conversation. Austin, I'll start with you. When brands come to you, what are they sort of looking for, and how do you ensure or sort of reassure them of a consistent experience is going to be had using your active ingredients in terms of potency, taste, onset times, etc.?
Yeah, so when brands come to us, we've kind of positioned ourselves and have started to be known as the beverage or cannabis-infused beverage experts. So the primary or kind of consistent amount of brands that come to us are a lot of beverage brands, not only cannabis startup brands, but traditional consumer product goods or CPG brands like the Vita Cocos, like PBRs of the world, that are coming and really looking to leverage their brand equity to create a cannabis product. And these beverage products, inherently are trying to take an oil, actually got some right here. They're trying to take an oil and turn that into something that's compatible with water. And as we all know, oil and water doesn't mix. So what they need is a consistent dose or metered dose throughout the entire beverage product. And historically, the problems that we're inherently solving is that a lot of cannabis beverages didn't have a good technology, a good emulsion technology or water dispersible technology to provide a consistent, even dose. In fact, a lot of original beverage products had oil slicks on the top, and consumers are kind of playing cannabis roulette, if you will, and saying, am I going to take a sip? Am I going to get 100 milligrams or 10 milligrams or no milligrams? So they're really, at the basic level, just want to know that you're going to get an even meter dose throughout the entire beverage. So what we do is that we take this cannabis oil and turn it into a water dispersible emulsion. And these emulsions are inherently evenly dispersed throughout the entire beverage, so that if you drank half this glass that was infused with 10 milligrams, you get exactly 5 milligrams. The next stage, after you get past homogeneity, what they're looking for is really designing an experience, and that's where we have a lot of fun. We believe that there is no one size that fits all. That's why we have multiple different type of emulsions, some that are conventional, some that are natural, and others that are certified organic. So we know that there's a lot of misinformation out there in the universe about what emulsions are. But when we use these different sets of ingredients, we help our brands design new experiences using these emulsions, and then also using different extracts. We don't cultivate, we don't extract. We start at the end of the extraction process with, any type of extract, whether it be a solventless, THC extract, or be a minor cannabinoid like THCV or Delta 8, or we use an isolate varietal. We can start with any high lipid-based extract and turn it into an emulsion. And what that does is enable the client to say, hey, I want a beverage that is 5 milligrams THC, 5 milligrams CBD, or I want to explore what the experience could be like for designing better sleep with CBN. So we're able to take those different extracts, turn them into a different emulsion, and put them into a beverage consistently so that we can create those new experiences and explore the whole realm of what these different cannabinoids can ultimately unlock. So I get super excited when, brands come to us and say, we want to go beyond just THC or CBD. We want to do something different. We want to design better sleep, or we want to help manage pain, or we want to help relieve stress. You of course have to be careful about the claims that you make, but and advise folks that, hey, we're only at the tip of the iceberg in this research exploration. But if you unlock the potential of seeing and feeling what these cannabinoids can do to you by having a consistent ingredient, then you can start to architect the different cannabinoids together to design those new experiences. So there's a lot coming to market this year. I think that there's a lot of exciting development in minor cannabinoids like Delta 8, like THCV, like CBN, CBC, and others that I mentioned, where brands are now starting to design experiences primarily around those mood states of pain, stress, and sleep. And that's where we have a lot of fun and help fulfill some of those wants of the brand.
Interesting. That's a perfect segue to the architect turned into chocolate maker. How, when you're continuing to evolve your formulas and responding to because I guess in some sense, popularity in minor cannabinoids are growing, but they're not quite there. So there's you have to, whilst you want to improve and develop and make your products better by introducing minor cannabinoids such as CBN, CBG, THCA, how do you continue to develop to ensure a consistent experience whilst educating why you're putting in these additional benefits for your customers as well? So how do you continue to evolve your product range with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we do one thing. We really focus on making consumable, edible products. It's really what we've leaned heavily into, and really into the confection side of things. So we work really closely with our suppliers like Austin and our our other suppliers here that are providing us the cannabinoids that they are developing, so we're able to deliver consistent products. So one of the things, we were pretty early on here in or I think we were the first one here in the Oregon market to really bring in heavy CBN in a ratio product. So in a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio, which is a THC, CBD, CBN. And so we've got that. We're bringing it into markets at a 50 milligram per package, and then in other markets at 100 milligrams. And that's pretty high when we're looking at CBN, but it's actually remarkably effective. And so when we launched that product, not only do we do a large education campaign, but we launched a full-on, and doing this in the pandemic is not easy because it's really digital, but we did a full-on kind of blast launch throughout the industry with getting as many people the product in their hands to actually test that. And so that's getting it in front of the bud tenders, in front of the people that are going to be selling these products. And so we gave away a ton of product. And a ton of product with education and the support, because if the product is good enough and it goes out there and the price is right, it will sell itself. But it's a kind of a combination. But we've really found is that leaning into the minor cannabinoids, and as Austin said, developing the experience and then being able to deliver consistently on that experience and delivering it with a taste profile that is just really great is, you can't go wrong with it. And it's just been really great. So, I don't know if that really answers the question.
No, that's super interesting. And I know earlier, Guy, we were talking about the kind of education piece at point of sales and kind of how, especially in a pandemic, I think it would be interesting to hear about your guys' experience, because I know you do a lot of product drops and in shop education. So how has that sort of shifted in the pandemic, and how have you been able to kind of move that to the digital channels and still get the same sort of education piece around the consumers?
Yeah, that's been the most difficult piece of this COVID thing that we're all in together. The silver lining, let me start with that, about COVID, is that for me personally, I feel like my every existence has been validated. Cannabis being named an essential business this last year, for those of us who've been advocating and waiting, is huge. I mean, as you guys remember, there were decades where literally folks would look at me in the face and be like, it's not medicine. So for it to be medicine, for most of our workers to be vaccinated already because we're deemed essential, is huge. That being said, bud tenders are out of the game. Brand ambassadors are kind of out of the game. And so it becomes very difficult to educate around cannabis. Cannabis, as we largely know now, is personalized medicine. Even CBN, for instance, which largely for most people works for sleep, some people do get the racy head, right? There are a percentage of population that feel sativas like indicas and vice versa. So we like to educate personal medicine, and we like people to take charge of their wellness. Cannabis for us is part of a larger, greener movement. It's not that we have a problem with pharma or typical medical establishment, but we are not in the business of giving you a pill or trying to fix it. We need folks to lean in and educate themselves and be present to their wellness. That is the gift of cannabis. In the traditional market, most people who came to cannabis at the last ditch effort were super educated on their ailments, whether it was MS, cancer and whatnot, and very present to themselves and found profound effects in cannabis once they found their modality. So for us, we do try to encourage people to start slow. Dosing is super important. Titrating up, getting your body acclimated to cannabis is the first thing, because when you're a new user, it's kind of like most of us don't remember our first drink, but it may not even work. You may not even feel anything. Then you feel something, then you feel too much. We have to kind of get our legs. And look, the same is true about all analgesics. When you get this notion that you get something from a doctor and it works right away, it's not true. You get a pill, you come back 2 weeks later, you report, they adjust the dosing, they adjust the medication. Cannabis needs that same diligence, that same presence. Now, if the bud tender can't do it, or you don't have somebody to help you through, well, we got to figure out how we have educational materials either on pack, on the internet. Interestingly, you guys know this new Clubhouse app. Well, we had already started a Clubhouse type Zoom thing where we were having Papa's Clubhouse and inviting bud tenders to it so that we could at least keep education going. We try to allow, obviously anybody that comes to us social media, we try to answer questions, try to be as present to the consumer as possible. But that's really all we can do. I hope COVID is over because, I love and appreciate minor cannabinoids, and I do think that we need to get and understand and access all parts of the plant. But right now, I'm focused on just making sure people even understand what THC and CBD do. because there is still so much misinformation out there. You know, I'll take it a step further. While I really appreciate CBD companies being able to provide some modicum of safe access around the nation, the fact is CBD right now and the national market presents a clear and present danger to cannabis, because most of the folks on that are just after the money, really racing to the bottom with distillate, not focusing on the plant-based medicine that it should be. First of all, encouraging this artificial separation of cannabis versus hemp, or even saying the word marijuana. Fact is, we have this plant, we have several varietals. If you're growing the medicinal varietal, it doesn't matter what cannabinoid it is. THC rich, CBN rich, CBG rich, grow the right varietal that spits out nice oil and big juicy flowers, and then we're talking the right talk, right? But even now, the scourge is still upon us, trying to separate the national channel, trying to separate plants artificially based on THC and the sensitivity around that particular cannabinoid, and all that is still kind of mucking up the conversation. So there's a lot of fear still in the populace. You have CBD consumers that have the audacity, after not taking any risk, riding on our coattails, putting big triangles that say THC free. They don't need to do that by law. Why would you demonize the cannabinoid and add more fear? So it has been difficult to continue that positive information to get the industry we want. Because again, no offense to pharma, I don't want single source cannabinoids or synthetic cannabinoids. I want to have a real section of plant-based medicine, consistent or not, that people understand plant-based medicine has benefits, should be honored, and should be farmed, not synthesized in the lab and over-processed. There's a place for that. I long for a cannabinoid-based injectable that may see reduction in tumors and that kind of stuff. Lots of science. But for us at Papa and Barkley, we're focused on the basic. And so from an educational perspective, just getting the basics would be a boon for us.
Yeah, I think as a consumer, you want the simplest message ever. And, you know, at least from our perspective, no one really reads the packaging. So it's hard, and they'll just bother you on email and phone calls. But so it's hard to get a simple message across, and especially now everything's digital, it's a bit of a conundrum, especially when you're getting new users into the market. As you grow, and this kind of, we can go to each section of you guys, but as you grow, what are the biggest risks to being able to maintain that consistency? So, you know, Christine, we can sort of start with you, but, you know, as you're kind of going to new areas domestically and internationally, you know, what and how are you kind of mitigating or overcoming some of the challenges that are presented?
Yeah, you know, some of the biggest challenges that we're finding with this is just keeping up with the growth that we have, and then managing. You know, it's different. You know, our CBD arm, we're able to manage. It has its own challenges, right? Because we're able to manage the production in our supply channel directly, because we're doing all of that at our headquarters here in Oregon, and then we're able to ship that out. Whereas with our THC, as we're operating in multiple states, that's a different problem, because then I'm having to work with local suppliers, at least from the THC side, the cannabinoid side of that. And then we're working with, you know, in the consistency and the taste profile that we're really committed to with our products. We have to then find partners in those individual states that are able to meet our requirements for what we want. And some of those different states with some of those suppliers don't even have the technologies to do that. So we're bringing that in and having to teach them new technologies, and then working with new labs and in different markets that are, you know, like some of these labs are like uncomfortably lax on their testing, as well as not having really the same kind of standards to base on. So we do a lot of leaning heavily back on our partners and where we came from in Oregon. And we've tested millions of products out of Oregon, and with a lab base and with partners here. And so as much as we can legally, we bring everything back and have everything tested back at the home base. Even we double, triple, quadruple test everything just to make sure that we're getting kind of consistency across the board. And, you know, I think a lot of that is finding, just with anything, it's like finding the right partners that are committed to finding solutions. And, you know, it's our commitment to the community. And it's one of the reasons why I think all of us are on this panel today are successful in our businesses is we're committed to delivering a product for the right reasons to our community at large. And being committed to that is what I'm not sure, we all want to make money, but I'm not in this to make money. I'm in it to deliver a consistent product that is able to hopefully break paths for what edible consumables can be for people, because it really is a gateway. It is a gateway product for so many people because like my mother, who was a very conservative Texan, is now able to sleep at night because she's not using Ambien anymore. She's able to take one piece of chocolate and she's able to disconnect in a way from that, whereas she will never smoke weed, that it will never be part of her life. But to be able to use natural cannabinoids and THC as a part of her natural medicinal life. But I think it's it's a challenge as we enter into different markets, and I think really acknowledging that and being able to keep your core team of partners and suppliers as you enter into new markets is really critically important as best you can.
And so just a quick follow-up, how hard has it been finding those partners? Like where do you assess alignment? Is it on the values? Sort of, how do you go about picking those partners?
I think a lot of it's on the values, having shared values, commitment for us, commitment to sustainability, commitment to their community, commitment to working through figuring out the solutions, along that. And a lot of it is, it's taken years to develop those relationships, but we're always looking for new ones. I'm really excited to talk to Vertosa about a new product that we want to, so it's finding these right? It's finding these connections and looking for opportunities. And I think it's, this is what I love about the cannabis community so much, is that it is a community. And what you find is that the people that kind of have their values aligned, they kind of merge together and their paths may cross, but it's really a pretty small community right now of some pretty amazing players. And so I think, as the world develops of cannabis, there's going to be lots of people that come in, but I think that the good people know good people and are able to introduce good people to good people. But it's a lot of just kind of asking around and figuring things out. And there's a lot of amazing people in this space doing really cool things. Because we're still at the garage band phase of things right now. We're still, we're still, as a whole, we're still figuring this out. It's pretty exciting. It's really exciting. I didn't really answer your question again, sort of. I just
you are getting there is a route that I'm following. Austin, what about you? What have been kind of the main challenges for you guys, and how have you kind of overcome them as you sort of try and keep maintaining the consistency in everything you're doing?
Yeah, I think Christine nailed a lot of them, and it really goes back to Guy's point. That I think is critical for the audience to hear, that there is this artificial divide of the industries. And it's literally represented that way through state barriers, or state borders rather. And that, for Christine, if she has started in Oregon and she's expanded to other states, she has to have consistent oil suppliers using the same standards and methods to get the same output that she's going to start with to put into her confections. And the fact is, over the last 10 years, that technology specifically has evolved so much so, but the operators and their capacity to adopt that technology, to apply it at scale is really, really, really hard. So getting the exact same purity or extract from Oregon to California to Colorado and beyond is very, very, very challenging. Mm-hmm. So we've had to overcome, these barriers by spending more to put up remote laboratories in the places that we operate. So we operate in California. We have a laboratory in Canada. We have one that's opened up in Massachusetts, and 3 more in the Midwest. I can't disclose right now, but are opening up, this first quarter. Super excited about that. But to ensure consistency, again, because we start with oil, it's really, drilling down on the SOPs of the partners that we have. We have to, have shared ethos and value for sure. At Vertosa, our core values are TLC, and it's trust, it's leadership, and community. So you have to check that box. But then when you get to the real brass tacks, it's really quality and consistency in process. It's what are the cultivars that you're using? What is the extraction method that you're using? Is it consistent to the SOPs? And can you actually provide those SOPs, for us to review to make sure they're consistent with our partners in California, as they're consistent with our partners in Canada, as they're consistent in Massachusetts and beyond. The fact of the matter is we're all creating CPG products. And in traditional CPG, like the Coca-Cola that you drink, if you drink a Coca-Cola in New York, you want the exact same experience in California or around the world when you drink that Coca-Cola. And that's all because they have very consistent SOPs, consistent formulas. So, we benefit because our formulation process is standardized. And we have a team of PhDs that are focused on very consistent standards and methods. That's it. So do the same process and be able to be agile and move that process state to state, because we have to overcome these these regulatory barriers that are created. But we want to remove those. And the best way that we remove those barriers is by really, really leaning in on the refinement process with our partners and ensuring that they have consistent methods at delivering extracts. And then the other challenging part is really not on us as the formulation folks in terms of the actual ingredients, but our partners, or our downstream partners and brands that we work with, scaling up their formulas. You may have a really, really good beverage formula that you made in the kitchen using all, wonderful fresh pressed, cold pressed juice, for example, but how do you scale that up to commercial production? How do you scale that up to making, going from 1,000 units to 100,000 units to 1 million units? You have to have a commercial formula and be able to, aggregate all of your supply chain partners from your juices, your sugars, and other active ingredients to get that commercial ready formula so that it does scale up in batch production. And that's really, really challenging for some folks that may be doing it for the first time. So it's really us having consistent methods, but then us educating our clients, our brands, on commercial production, scaling up their production, ingredient selection for scale up, and making sure you're designing your formulas for scale, because we all have a want to get this product to more people so they can enjoy cannabis in a more familiar way, beverage, confections, topicals. But you have to be able to produce that product at scale. And it's really, really hard to do it. And I really applaud both Christine and Guy for doing that, because confection space, for those that haven't made chocolates, that is hard to do at scale. And for those that, like Guy, that are committed to having a simple product, that's really hard to do as well at scale. So you just have to refine that process time and time again until you are able to scale up and cross all these ridiculous state borders that are making it that much harder to get consistent supply chain.
Does your cannabis or hemp business need financing to grow? Would you like to access capital without giving up more equity in your business? Bespoke Financial has got you covered. Bespoke is a licensed lender serving cannabis and hemp operators of all sizes, including cultivators, manufacturers, distributors, brands, and dispensaries. With our financing, you can access capital, manage bills, and grow your business with a simple application and no prepayment penalties. Does your long cash collection cycle make it hard to pay expenses? Want to offer your customers terms but still access capital tomorrow? Bespoke offers invoice financing, allowing you to access capital within 2 business days and enjoy consistent cash flow. Are you tired of missing out on buying opportunities and want to increase your purchasing power? Bespoke offers inventory financing to pay your vendors COD, buy raw materials in bulk to lower costs, and never miss out on growth opportunities. Bespoke also offers a general line of credit for qualified borrowers, which puts you in control to pay expenses as needed. This can be used to purchase products, finance expansion, pay taxes, and much more. Bespoke accepts payments in cash, check, ACH, or wire transfers. Apply now at bespokefinancial.com and never miss out on an opportunity because of working capital constraints.
Yeah, I was going to ask just around, because I know when we first spoke, you used a phrase which I really like, which was you're essentially professionalizing grandma's formula. So you're trying to keep it simple. And what is the biggest challenge with that when you scale and expand territories and regions? Because that's pretty tricky to do when you have such a simple formula. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. That is what we are doing. And I think so, candidly, and this is without ego, we have not left California simply because our standards are a little high, and solventless extractions, and that concept is for the cannabis faithful, right? When grandma makes you something, she is not thinking about scale. She's putting in TLC, tender loving care, and making it for you. One of our mottos is for the ones we love. It's from our core and our origin story, right? So we've scaled grandma's recipe, which is a lot of TLC, and it's very difficult. When we look outside to other partnerships, solventless extraction is usually scary to folks because it's an economic thing. You have to want to do it. You're not gonna you definitely have to have, one of our mottos is quality over margin, right? So for those in the audience who don't understand what solventless means in cannabis, the easiest way to describe it is, if you imagine the trichome, you zoom in on the plant that has these little hairs, the trichome sac is a little ball. That is where all your medicine is. It's like a little fruit. In fact, it works like a fruit. The stem, the trichome head, stalk meets the head and forms the fruit, filled with all your different cannabinoids, all your terpenes. You shake that off, that's called keef. That's a mechanical separation extraction. That extract versus something that's been refined, whether it's using alcohol or BHO or CO2, the difference to me is fresh squeezed orange juice and tang, right? You know fresh squeezed orange juice when you taste it. You may not make it, you may not have a maker at home, you may be fine with Tropicana or whatever, but you know the quality of fresh squeezed orange juice. That's the bar that we're trying to set. Is very difficult. While we haven't gone any other states, we do have a robust national line, and I always am proud to say that it is exactly what we're doing in California. The first step to consistency for us is the plant. It all starts with the plant. Because we don't engage in a lot of refinement, it has to be at the farm level. So, of course, because of our extract line, Papa Select, we started a tissue culture. I would also tell people in the audience, get down with tissue culture. We don't need to make the same mistake that the ornamental flower guys did. For those of you who don't know, decades ago, when we really started to do this Mother's Day, this Valentine's Day thing, flowers started to pick up. There was a big crash in the market because they were all going from seed and from clone. Well, in clones and seed, viruses lay dormant and can pop up at any time. And they started to have systemic crop failures at scale. We can't let that happen to the cannabis industry. So I'm encouraging everybody, if you have genetics that you love, start your tissue culture, get virus-free, clean tissues. That's how you start. So we start banking tissue cultures when we do decide to start to go into other states, and we have some irons in the fire, and I suspect we'll be multi-state, truly multi-state in that full spectrum way by the end of this year. But we will be bringing our tissue cultures and our cultivars with us to keep that consistency, and we're going to look for small farming partners because, kind of like with grandma, I can't go to a person that's like, oh, I'm growing 55,000 acres for oil. No, I need you to grow flowers with all the TLC, not just for oil. I don't need any atmospheric particulate or anything. I need juicy trichomes that I can extract using ice water or mechanical separation, because that's all the refinement or the only thing that's going to touch the plant. So it's terribly important that we empower farmers, in the different locales. Another thing that's interesting about cannabis is, look, I started as an indoor grower. I get it, but we don't grow grapes indoors. And I don't believe that we're going to grow cannabis indoors for much longer. It's not the right thing for Mother Earth, and I don't think it's the right thing for cannabis. I think similar to our friends in the wine industry, what we grow in Humboldt will thrive, but it'll be different than what they grow in Vermont, what they grow in Spain, and other appellations that are great for cannabis. That's what we should be looking towards. And then in terms of finally that extraction rate that prohibits us from really scaling, and grandma, when she buys quality ingredients, well, there's quality ingredients at the store. Right now, most of us in cannabis are still living the legacy of scarcity, the legacy of I need 20% extraction rate. The commodity is way priced up. The good news is, like all commodities, more and more people are growing it. We get more and more acceptance, and the price will come down. At one point, yes, there will be a need for distillate, just like there's a need for Bud Light, but there will also be top shelf single malt scotch, or to use a wine analogy, there'll be $2 Chuck and there'll be $1,000 bottles of wine. But what we need to do right now in the industry is establish those reasonable levels through education and science before we're left like so many other industries, monocropping, or like the tobacco industry with just pre-roll cigarettes. Those things can't happen. And then lastly, I'll just say on consistency for us, you brought up Grandma's recipe. I think that it's awesome that the industry wants to make it easy for the consumer, but I think the consumer also has to lend themselves to the gift of cannabis.
Chocolate, fat-based, formulas that readily accept cannabis, looking to those to do it clean and natural. There's going to be plenty of products that newbies have never tried. So while when I was younger, I wanted to buy my Rotovap, I wanted to refine cannabis, it was so exciting. That's because I had been held back. But I've been blessed to come full circle and say, you know what? I want to just do the cleanest thing possible. When I grew up, all there was white bread. Now my wife would die if I ate it. It's got to be 7-grain, nut sprouted bread, because that's what's good for you, and we know that. So does cannabis have to go all the way down the line of refined white sugar, or can we just stay in raw, unrefined sugar, right? We have people saying, oh, look at this clear thing. Clear is clean. Is it? I thought trichomes were amber. So we have to kind of get that education out before our industry and the true nature of cannabis is marginalized under the notion of scaling and extraction rates and the monetizing of the commodity. So anyway, like I said, I can go on.
It's a tricky sort of, keeping that sort of the purity of it and the scale question, right? Because I mean, Christine, it's sort of what you're going through now is that you want to hold it close to where you can control it, but then also demand is taking you elsewhere, and it's an interesting conundrum, and it's a tricky one to, obviously you want to make a business that's successful, but then how do you ensure you're maintaining the right partners in order to do that? And I actually had a question around that in terms of scaling to other regions and actually internationally, just maybe I'm biased because I'm in London, but how do you ensure you're sort of, as we've seen with novel foods, maintaining and seeing that you're compliant? Are you doing testing that's above and beyond what you do in other areas, or how do you kind of work in new markets where things are a bit different? I know that's also a domestic question, across border lines, etc., or state lines rather. So it'd be interesting to hear that.
Yeah, it's really funny. I was up all hours of the night on Thursday just completing our novel food application for the UK due to first off, even just dealing with the time changes with working in different across the world is its own complex issues, and understanding the different regulations. But really it all goes back to leaning into the fundamentals of really understanding what our recipes are, what our SOPs are, knowing exactly what we're doing, having really good standards. I mean, I can't have any doubt of what we're doing with our ingredients and where we're going, because if I can't figure that out here, I can't go out and do it in other locations. And then it is making sure, taking those standards, looking at other locations like for the UK or for the EU, or even ironically enough, that is easier to manage with consistency within the products, because we can do our testing here. But what's more difficult in the CBD market, as Guy was saying too, is that there's not, it really is a disservice. The THC, the cannabis market has more standards and more consistency because it's more regulated, where the CBD is so wide open, there's no regulation, that it's let so many bad players on the market, and consumers are confused and they don't understand. And so it's really difficult. So we do, we've got QR codes on every single package. We're leading people into our testing. We are as transparent and as open as possible. We've gone above and beyond with doing full panel testing on our CBD products for pesticides, for microbials, for residual solvents, for anything. Even, I mean, that stuff doesn't show up. Like we don't even have that on an edible, on a chocolate bar or a gummy. But running those full panels so that we can show that to consumers, and then be able to, Alaska has its own standards and that are far different than New York, than California, than Oregon and the UK. And so just trying to cover our basis and then being as transparent as possible, being there. We have 2 full-time customer support folks that are versed and educated, that are literally trying to answer the calls and are available day or night for anyone that has questions, not just about our products, but that wants to understand about, the plant. And it's just trying to provide a resource to that. But it's a real challenge, and it's it's a challenge.
And do you find it also tricky in terms of, because we've talked a lot about the product and what about sort of the brand experience? Because obviously you're very far removed, being on the other side of the world. How do you ensure that it's placed, do you have sort of brand guidelines when you're sort of moving into new territories? How do you go around and ensuring that?
Well, we do. We focus a lot on really trying to provide with our retail partners a consistent brand guideline, so they're able to educate the consumer through us. And really that's our job is we provide them access to a digital deck where they're able to learn. We provide them digital education. We hopefully are able to provide them the ability to be able to merchandise the product in a way that's able to provide that kind of education material, and then the ability for them to be able to direct their consumers that might have questions back to the brand, so they're not having to be responsible for that. And I'd say that it's moderately successful. I mean, that's the reality of it. It's just really challenging to work with different levels of retailers that are more sophisticated than others. And some are really great and are really involved with getting their staff educated. And some really aren't and are less interested in that. And they just want to put the product on their shelves, and they think they're going to make $1 million by selling CBD products. And the reality is nobody's going to buy it if they don't understand it and if they don't know how to use it. Because for most people, just try eating a piece of CBD chocolate at night, it's not going to change your life in a way that drastically makes you, if you couldn't sleep before, without going through the trials and tribulation and understanding it and knowing how to use it and figuring out what your dose is and what time of day to take it, and whether or not how much food you've taken, how your body is going to metabolize that. There's a lot of complexities, just as Guy was saying, with any kind of medicine and understanding your body. And so I think it's a challenge that we with the industry really have to tackle. And I think, that leads back to what our obligation is to the community with being in this industry, and then finding partners that are aligned with us with those values that can help us propel that momentum and message forward, really.
Yeah, it's particularly hard in these kind of immature markets where as retailers are just like, oh, CBD, great, chuck it in here. And you're like, they don't know anything about this. Can we just, everyone's different.
And over half the CBD products on the market may not even have CBD in them. I mean, we don't really know or what.
Like, it never worked. It never worked for me.
They have hemp oil.
Yeah.
Austin, on the kind of you said as well that you kind of moved internationally to some, I think London was one that you used. In terms, I don't know enough about the kind of technology behind and the science behind it all, but how does it work if there are certain sort of like legal requirements in certain geographies, around, I don't know, nanotechnology? Does that significantly then change the consistency in the active ingredient or what you're offering those markets to what you're offering locally?
Absolutely. And Christine said it best, that there's just so much complexity, and you do have to spend a lot of time, energy, research dollars, and regulatory dollars figuring out what the local jurisdiction says and what the rules are. And so even here domestically in the U.S., going state to state has different laws. Going country to country has different laws. And so, it's something that I'm intimately familiar with, working with Vita Coco. Actually, this product here that's distributed in the UK through Holland and Barrett is not only novel foods around hemp, but novel foods around nanotechnology.
Yeah.
And so they're just like hemp in cannabis, and there's a lot of misinformation. It's all cannabis, and it's multiple varietals of the cannabis plant. Nanotechnology is also misinformed. Everyone is talking, nanotech, it means really small droplet size. It means all of these other things that it's not. It's really just high energy encapsulations. And so I'll give an example. Even in the EU, under novel foods guidelines, they have classified nano as sub 120 nanometers. Talk to a chemist, their brain almost explodes because they're saying, what definition did this come from? Even here in the US, it's like, is it 500 nanometers, 1,000 nanometers? Like, what is it? And a chemist will tell you it's energy. It's just using high energy to create an encapsulation. But hey, the powers that be, the regulators, you have to sometimes just kind of like a chameleon, kind of just move through it and kind of work through the laws. So what we do, very similar to Christine, is we provide more documentation and more testing than probably is necessary, but is necessary to make everyone feel safe and comfortable. So in the EU, our products, we do a test called dynamic light scattering, where we're literally measuring the droplet size or the particle size to show customs as well as the local regulatory channels that this ingredient is above 120 nanometers. That enables the brand to take that documentation, go to a distributor or a retailer and show, hey, we're passing all the guidelines when it comes to novel foods, when it comes to our ingredients, when it comes to the technologies that we use. Additionally, on the other side of the pond, traceability becomes even more critical. And so what Christine's doing, and by putting QR codes and leading with transparency, is absolutely critical to building trust in the supply chain. And so we do that. I mean, we're open kimono. We don't cultivate, we don't extract. So we readily supply, hey, this is the cultivator, this is the extractor. If it's a product that is not using extract, but using something more similar to Guy's method in cold water hash or keef, we can use that product and show and trace it back to the farm. And we want that and we need that because consumers today, that's what they're asking for. It's really no different in other industries. I mean, you look at coffee and they're looking for that traceability too. They want to sell that origin story. It helps the consumer get closer to the plant. It gets them closer to the farm. And I think that's necessary as we really uplift and really vocalize where this plant is coming from, who was cultivating it. That story is critical to building trust and educating the consumer on these products. So again, it just goes back to documentation, and sometimes it is like I'm pulling my hair out because I get questionnaire after questionnaire after questionnaire. I can only imagine. I can not only imagine it, but I feel for Christine right now going through that novel foods application, all the gray areas around it. I've had to help so many clients through it. It's not easy.
It just shows sort of how much investment's required. Like it just kind of, unfortunately, you really need all the resources behind you in order to kind of get through all the local jurisdictions because it's expensive. The constant testing and keeping it local so you can check the consistency. It's just it's hard to scale when you might not necessarily have all the resources behind you. It's tricky.
It can be brutal, but last part here, just part of our responsibility. We're all believers in this plant. We know that it's great. I'm the guy that's never taken never taken any like hard over the counter application. I played college football. I barely even took Advil because I knew the cannabis plant could solve my ailments, and it's necessary. It's a necessary evil to get through all this regulatory scrutiny in order to deliver consistent great products. And so it's the fight we fight. And we'll keep fighting it until it's readily available, because that's our responsibility.
Guy, I've got the final question with you, as I've got 4 minutes left. I sort of wanted to ask you again around the kind of brand consistency. I know you recently launched with edibles, and I'm just sort of wondering how you maintain when you have sort of different formats. How do you create the kind of overarching consistent brand with all that sort of with different products out underneath?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I will try to be terse, but it was a struggle. Like, honestly, I formulated our first edibles almost 3 years ago, and we did kind of wrestle because we started with the balm and the tinctures, which allowed us to quote unquote have that first cannabis conversation. Because, like, no matter how off-putting somebody is to cannabis, you put the balm on them, especially an older person, they feel it. They're like, oh, and it starts to disarm it, and you start to have that first conversation. We had the last conversation with our premium solventless ice water hash, which is like probably, literally balls of fruit. You can literally see the trichomes. But it's really that thing in between, right? How do we build a consistent brand? And the wellness sector is thin, but that was the argument. You'll notice I don't like to say words like recreational or adult use or, marijuana versus hemp. To me, it's all wellness. Cannabis, as validated this year, is a wellness product. The modality you take is different. Now, we'll cut right to the chase. Smoking, combusting carcinogens is bad, right? However, all drugs can have side effects. So at one point, it becomes either quality of life or efficacy over side effect, however you want to cut it. Even smoking, in my estimate, is relaxing. It can kill anxiety. But there are some folks who absolutely have to smoke because they need that rapid onset. They need it to get to their bloodstream like that. So we can't rule smoking out. And while Pop and Barkley hasn't gotten into the flower game because of this same argument, I hold possible that there is a classy way to do wellness flowers. However, luckily, because of technology, we now have aromatherapy. Some people want to call it dabbing. I call it dabbing. But really, low temperature vaporization is nothing more than aromatherapy. Again, now the commodity is expensive and we sell it by the gram and we try to hold it in and all that. Why? That's just scarcity. At one point, you will be able to take your electronic device, put concentrate in there, allow it to warm up and diffuse its essential oils, and you breathe that in and breathe in the efficacy. So we're already solving even the inhalable part. All the other modalities to me are wellness, and so now it becomes about the brand. For Pop and Barkley, we are settled in our brand identity as a premium wellness brand. We're never going to be Bud Light. We're always going to advertise mature use, conscious use, present use for your wellness, right? It's great. Young folks should have fun. I'm not trying to disparage. I'm not trying to say that there isn't a straight up recreational component. But even in that, I think about when we say recreational, luckily, I used to drink. I have no problem. I'm not a prohibitionist. But as I've crested 40, I pretty much stopped drinking. Maybe I'll have the odd toast. But cannabis is what I do when I come home to take the stress off. Is it better? 100%. I don't think that's up for debate. The effects of alcohol on the body over time versus the actual positive benefits to your ECS and regulatory system of cannabis. But yet all of us, especially in the modern world, need to take the edge off a little bit. Cannabis is there for wellness regardless of the modality. So for us now, we're endeavoring using grandma's recipes to find products that we can make in a clean, TLC-loving way. So we may not make a liquid beverage because it may not be the right product for us. That's not to say that's not great products. It's just we're going to look for products that we can make in that kind of brand identity of 100% clean, 100% tox-free, unrefined products, right? We're going to make that sprouted bread. Well, sprouted bread is not good on all sandwiches. It just isn't. But that's where we're okay. So our brand is really defined by the quality and the value proposition You know, like I think about our gummies that we just put out, they're sugar-free. Why? Because we felt there was a hole. When I worked for Montel, I'll wrap it up here. One of the things Montel said when the things started getting, popping in Colorado, and we started to see things here, he said, patients are going to get left behind. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, people are going to start to rush to make money. They're going to focus on the rec side and all kinds of crazy things. And patients, people who actually need it, are going to get left behind. I kind of didn't hear that because I have been blessed to be somewhat healthy, but he was right. And when we started to look back 2-3 years in, I was like, oh, this is what he's saying. And so now we're doubling down on getting sugar-free edibles, products that you can use in different modalities that won't affect your diet, that won't interfere with your other narcotics if you have to take them, because patients shouldn't be left behind. But in fact, we're all patients. I hope that answers the question.
That's brilliant. What a way to end. Guys, thank you so much. This was a real honor to be on a panel with you guys and to moderate the brains. So thank you so much for taking the time. And I guess we're over.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Nice.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you all. Absolute pleasure.